Good morning, everybody. I say good morning because it is 1:15 in the morning and my husband is asleep and my kids are with their dads, so I can't sleep and I figured it would be a good time to talk about grief from a different perspective tonight, this morning. Um, this one has a lot to do with grief when it comes to relationships ending. By relationships, I mean um, intimate relationships for the most part. So I kind of wanted to go into my story a little bit when it comes to grief when relationships end. Um, to make a long story short, I grew up in a very disorganized attachment kind of way due to watching my mom go through an abusive relationship after she and my dad divorced. And I was 7. And she was in that relationship for about 5 years, and there was a lot of abuse in every way imaginable, especially with me, from the relationship that she was in. We were in that situation for about 5 years, but during that 5 years of my life, it really shaped, I guess, unknowingly, like my definition of relationships in a way, because I remember how she and my dad were together and it seemed very loving. I loved my dad. My dad was an amazing dad growing up. He still is a great dad, but um, I remember doing a lot of things with my dad up until the age of like 7 to 8 that, normal dads and daughters would do. And then, watching my mom go from her marriage with my dad to just something the complete opposite during a very formative time of my life was pretty detrimental to me and traumatic. Um, when it comes to grief and relationships, I'm only speaking for me. I think that the way I experienced watching my mom go through her relationships in my childhood conditioned me to tolerate a lot more in my early relationships than I should have or probably would have if I had learned how healthy relationships looked when I was young. I carried a lot of trauma and I had a lot of expectations for the partners that I was with. And I had this thing about falling in love with their potential. And it created this sense of hypervigilance and wanting to control on my part. I'm pretty sure that I had PTSD going into my first real relationship when I was 17, going on 18. And it seemed so beautiful at first. Like it was more than what I expected. And my partner at that time was 4.5 years older than me, nearly 5 years older than me. Just beautiful, said all the right things. And when I look back on that time, this was in the early 2000s. So narcissistic personality disorder really wasn't a diagnosis just yet. But I wanted to be with someone who resonated with me so deeply because I felt so much older at 17 and 18 than my age because of what I had been through. And I got attached, I think, very early on because I had this dream in my head that this was something that I desperately wanted. And I couldn't believe that I had attracted this person in my life. And it really was like a dream. And I thought that I deserved that dream with someone who was in every type of way my type. He was very smart. He seemed very open-minded when it came to the world. And I was graduating high school at the time and entering college. And I wanted someone older at that time because I felt so much older. And it was really cool to me that I was able to experience life in that way with someone that I thought was on my wavelength. Um, so in this aspect, grief, when it comes to relationships, it was like I was on a roller coaster because the person that I was with had a lot of demons and a lot of vices that I had spent my whole life up until that point observing in adults in my life and recognizing that they were not making healthy choices. So the grief was very multifaceted in that relationship for me. I was instantly drawn to this person from what I remember, and we really enjoyed the same kind of music, and we just seemed to really vibe together. And for about 3 years at that point, it was really, it was good. It had its moments, especially when it came to his addictions and issues that he had. And I really believe that he had his own unresolved trauma. But in me, it was more of like, I see how smart you are and I see how capable you are. So why are you doing this to yourself? Why are you self-sabotaging? And the grief came in for me when I started to realize that someone that I loved so deeply didn't love themselves or didn't think that they were worthy enough to have the kind of love that I was willing to give. And what my definition of love was back then, I mean, that was over 20 years ago. It was 22 years ago, 23 years ago, has drastically changed from my life experiences. But back then, being so young and seeing the world in this beautiful lens of I have the world in front of me and it's going to be amazing when I move out on my own with my boyfriend. When I started seeing the reality of things and started thinking about what that meant for me, I started becoming disappointed in a way. But I stayed for a while because I genuinely loved him. I'd never felt anything like this before with anybody. So, um, we, so I was accepted into a college in Texas that I had been wanting to go to all my life. And I do have a tendency of being not like selfish, I guess, but I know what I want in life. I'm an Aries, if that says anything. So, um, if I have my mind focused on something that I want to do, I I make it happen. That's just, it's very much like I'm going to manifest something and I'm going to make it happen. I'm determined to make it happen. And at that time, it was me going to college in Austin so I could pursue an art degree because I really wanted to major in art at that time. And I just wanted to have the experience of living in Austin because it was amazing and just a dream of mine. Things didn't work out with this person that I was with. And I remember uh, the way that it ended up not working out crushed me because that was all that I knew for 3 years. And I feel like I lost my identity in that 3 years, but I also was finding myself as a very young adult. And I wanted to share that with this person. Um, but I went to college by myself. I was pretty destroyed on how the ending happened between us because I'm a kind of person that feels things really, really deeply. I love really hard. Um, and so what that looks like sometimes is tough love too. And I realize now that my expectations for myself are totally different than the expectations that I have for other people now. But I think I punished my boyfriend at the time by thinking that I could set those same expectations on him and he would have the same motivation as me to make something of himself. That was probably my biggest lesson in realizing that everyone has their own reality. No matter how hard I tried, it seemed um, there were just cracks that were showing at the time. I had lost a lot of my self-esteem in this relationship. I lacked a sense of trust somewhat, and then at the end of that relationship, things were just completely broken between us. And I moved to Austin by myself, got into another relationship that I probably shouldn't have with a boyfriend that I had in high school. And my life was just so chaotic at that time that I think I turned off all feelings that I had other than sadness and longing and missing my boyfriend that I had and really grieving while I was trying to live this different, vast, diverse, awesome life that I thought I was going to have in Austin. Um, and then I moved back to Waco later that year. And I remember thinking, okay, well, I'm going to be back in Waco. So I, maybe there's a chance that I'll be back with him. Maybe we can get back together and work on things. So things kind of ran a course for about a year and we ended up getting back together. But it was more of like me trying to be with him constantly. And in that, I was not valuing myself. I wasn't loving myself. It was just this rumination of what could have been, and then limerence of, this could be what life is like. And I would try to make things happen to where I could just talk with him again, or I could just be around him again. And I thought that the more I was present or I made myself available, the more he would realize that I loved him and I wanted to be with him again. And um, it just kind of made me look desperate. And then, that in itself is kind of something that I grieved because it was like I was losing myself and I didn't treasure the experiences that I should have treasured because I was so I'm not going to say the word obsessed. I don't really like that word, especially when there's trauma involved that people have been through. But he was my best friend for 3 years before that, and I felt lost without him. Um, and so we grieve the loss in so many ways whenever relationships end. But we got back together, and a year after we got back together, we had our son, who is the biggest blessing of my life. I have two boys, and they're both my biggest blessings. But my firstborn has saved my life more than I could ever tell anybody. Um, about a year after he was born, we ended up getting married. Oh, I'm sorry, it was maybe like 5 months after he was born, we got married. Uh, and I remember wondering if I was making the right decision because there were trust issues in the past, but it was more of me not having regained self-esteem and me feeling really down about myself. Uh, and the way that like I looked, like how I looked after giving birth, which was kind of a crazy thing for me because I was 24 and no one told me that you still look pregnant after you give birth. Um, so there were, in that relationship, there were a lot of losses and just roller coaster. And it was, you know, happy and on for 3 years for the most part, and then off, and then on for 3 years, and then off, and then on, it's just, it was, it was a lot of me needing to find myself realizing what codependency looked like, what reliance on someone financially or for validation looked like. And when I didn't have those, the first time we were together and we broke up, it sent me into a tailspin. I remember walking in Austin alone at the time, just listening to my CDs. I'm aging myself. But just wandering and just looking up at the sky and thinking how lonely I was sometimes. And then after we got married, we were married for, gosh, maybe a year and a half, and things went sour again. And there was distance. And I don't know if anybody has ever felt this kind of pain. When you are in a relationship with someone for a long period of time and you make a commitment like marriage, and there is distance, but it's not just physical distance, it is emotional distance. And it's like your heart and your gut are telling you that something is extremely wrong, but you can't quite put your finger on it. That for me is the most unnerving feeling imaginable. It's like your heart is shredding itself apart, but it doesn't know why. So there was a lot of emotional distance, and I'm very intuitive, so I knew that something was going on. I just didn't know what. So I started paying attention to things like he was spending more time in the bathroom getting ready than I was. He was putting on cologne, going to work at a restaurant. He was not smoking cigarettes as much and chewing gum to have fresh breath whenever he went to work. So you can see where I'm going with this. And while I was feeling my heart shredding, and I would ask him, what is going on? Can we talk about this? It would be like, oh no, nothing's going on. I'm fine. We're fine. Or just not talking to me at all, keeping answers very short. And I remember looking at him directly in his eyes at some point, and I said, are you seeing anybody other than me, even though we're married? And he looked me right in the eye and said that he was not seeing anybody else. Well, come to find out that was a lie. Uh, and during that time, I was completely lost because I had this precious, precious boy um, in our marriage, like in our relationship. And I was working at the time. I was freshly graduated from college with my bachelor's degree. And the grief that you carry, knowing that something is wrong, but you're not getting a straight answer, you're not getting any kind of closure while trying to be a parent, is one of the hardest things, one of the hardest feelings anybody could ever have. And I don't like talking about this. I don't like remembering that time of my life. I don't like remembering what that felt like. There are still some songs back then that I used to listen to on repeat over and over and over again because I just needed like music to bring out some kind of pain in my heart and just let it go, and it wouldn't go. Or I would cry all the time while holding my 2-year-old and just rocking him and myself and telling the both of us that we were going to be okay. While my husband was with another woman most of the time, and the place that we lived in together, I hated being there after all of those things happened. I had to get out of there with my son, and I had to start new because every time I was in our apartment, it was like the walls were closing in on me, and my nervous system had, I don't think I've ever felt nervous system dysregulation that way until that point in my life. And I think I was about 26, 27, 26. Um, and just panicking every day. Like, I could see my marriage falling apart. I could see my son probably growing up without a dad. Um, I could just imagine very vividly what my husband was doing with this other woman, and it made me sick to my stomach. I didn't like to eat. I could barely sleep. If there were times I slept, I wouldn't want to get up out of bed. I mean, that was the extent of my grief. Um, and after I asked him to leave, which he did, he moved out. Uh, I filed for divorce that August, and I had to move in with one of my best friends with my son because I really needed support. I really needed um, to be taken care of by someone who cared about me and cared for my well-being, and not only for mine, but for my son's too. I needed somewhere that was safe, that wasn't the same four walls that I was cheated on in, or just had a lot of precious memories in. So when I lived with my friend, I let myself grieve the way that I needed to. When I say grieve, um, it probably was not the healthiest way to grieve. I lost about 60 to 70 pounds in 3 months because I did not eat at all. If I did, I was immediately sick. I threw up all the time. Uh, I was so preoccupied with like trying to figure out, and this is how I really got, like, I got deep into astrology because I was trying to like search for something outside of me as to why these things were happening to me. Was it on my life path? Like, what was I supposed to learn from this? And I remember moving into a townhouse that was like 2 streets over from my best friend's house. And it was really strange because part of the sadness really went away, that's when loneliness kind of set in. But the the pride that I felt for getting off my feet and getting out of bed and saving up enough money for my son and I to get a place to live, and just realizing that I could do this. Like, it was going to be really hard, but I was going to be able to provide for my son. Um, I was paying rent. I was able to get a new car. Uh, I did all of that without a guy, especially a guy who broke my heart several times. And in that grief, every time I would see him, it was just like the heartstrings would still pull, and I still wanted to be with him. But I was getting better at letting go, and really made my son my priority. Um, and I mean, I worked 2 jobs and I was in grad school at the time. But I did that because I wanted my son and I to have a really great life. And I wanted my son to know that, like, his dad might not be around very often, but his mom loves him with everything that she has. And whatever she's done, it's because mom's always wanted him to have a good life and to not lack anything. That caused me to be gone a lot for my son's childhood, unfortunately. But we had our own place. We had food. We had electricity. We were warm. We were safe. We had a great support system. And that's one of the most precious times of my life, is when I was able to move in that house with my son. And it was like the grief started lifting about a year after we started living there. And uh, his dad ended up going to rehab for a while. I think part of me getting over that a lot was knowing that he was 6 hours away. And it was painful at times because I really wanted my son to be able to see his dad, and for his dad to have a good relationship with our son. But I tried to be the constant in my son's life. And I think at that point, the thing I was grieving the most was that my son wasn't able to have his dad around him. Uh, when I talk about grief, there's just a part, it's kind of the same way as dying. Whenever we have someone, that we've loved physically pass on, for me, my divorce it was a loss for me. It was a death for me. It was final. There were so many things that couldn't be fixed. And truly, I was not the same person that I was when I met him about 10 years before that. I wasn't going to make excuses for his behavior and decisions anymore. It's not my responsibility. It wasn't back then. It never was. But I wanted him to do good, and I believed in him. And that belief is that the belief that I have in people is the way that I love them, if that makes sense. And I'm not at fault. There were a lot of things I should have done differently, and I could have done differently. But I did the best I could at that time. And I don't feel guilty about anything I did. I feel like I've forgiven him, which is really a big sign of growth for me because I have a really hard time with forgiveness. um, but we learn from grief. We learn from the profound grief of losing a relationship that was so real to us. And when we get to a point where we thought that we knew someone for so long, it's kind of like we've lost part of ourselves knowing this person and investing our time and knowing and sharing with this person, that we lose a part of ourselves in an unhealthy relationship, especially when there's addiction involved. And when you share kids with somebody in that kind of relationship, it's so much sadness being a single parent while you're trying to be healthy for your kids. For me, I feel like I have a duty as a mom to two boys to show them how to respect women, how to treat women with kindness, have empathy for others, be compassionate, not be afraid of your feelings. Those are the lessons that I teach my boys. I want them to be smart. They are smart. They're so funny. They're amazing. They're such big blessings. Um, and when it comes to things like school, yeah, I want them to do well in school, but I feel like the world could use a lot more kindness and empathy and respect than just A's all the time. And that's where I stand with them. And I feel like, they're their own people, but I feel like I've done a pretty good job raising them that way. And I've had a great support system that's helped, a little bit with that too. I don't hide my feelings from my kids, especially because they are boys. I want them to know that it's okay to cry. I want them to know that it's okay to talk things out when you're hurting. I want them to know that healthy relationships are based on good communication. And I have worked really hard to not condition them to be toxic or holding back their feelings or having, this macho, well, I'm not going to share my feelings with anybody, and I'm going to show girls that I like them by like picking on them and hitting them and pushing them. We don't do that in my house. If you feel a certain way, you approach someone calmly and you talk about it. When it comes to grief, period, in any kind of way that you lose someone, it could be physical, emotional, mental, especially if there is kind of a soul tie with them, if you have made an agreement such as marriage, or if you've made a deep commitment with them, there's going to be pain if you've really loved them, if you really invested in them, if you had kids with them. To me, having children with someone is one of the most sacred things that you can do on earth, because you're creating this new beautiful life and you want them to have things better than you ever did. And that's another layer of grief whenever things happen and you're like, oh no, I'm not going to be able to give that life to my child because I've screwed things up, or play the blame game of, oh, well, they screwed things up. Well, no, that doesn't help either. So through grief, I've had to really learn how to be present for my kids, to show them healthy emotions, to let them know that hugs are good, that accidents happen. That's a big one in my house. It's good to love other people, and it's even better to love, girls or women one day. It's even better to understand why women and girls are so emotional, or um, to listen and to be present themselves with their friends or whoever. I've had to learn how to be more patient and calmer. I've had to learn that I cannot expect anyone to do anything if they're not capable of it, or if they just don't want to. It doesn't mean that they love me any less. It's just more of a reflection on the way they love themselves, if they even do. I've also learned about healthy boundaries. I've learned that I am capable of being a badass. like I I look back at that part of my life and I'm like, man, I really had 2 jobs, and I went to grad school, and I was a single mom, and I had an awesome house, and I have this awesome son. I did it with both of my boys. I was a single mom for a long time. But after you sit in the loneliness, after you just sit and take a look around of everything that you've done for yourself and your kids, it's like, man, I did this. And it's like, I still think of it as one of the biggest accomplishments of my life. Like, being a single mom was one of the biggest accomplishments of my life, and something that I'm so proud of, because I have 2 amazing kids from, traumatic experiences that I've had with 2 people, and they're the best of me and the best of them. And so out of that grief, like, I don't feel like my heart has healed all the way. I don't think that I have a hard heart, but the tearing of the heart that I had, I feel like it's put together with stronger material and different material, because it made me really work on myself after my second divorce, and just be like, you know what? It's really time for me to concentrate on me and my kids. And if someone comes along that's on the same, energetic wavelength as me, if they've worked on themselves like I have, then that's great. But I'm not looking for anybody right now. I'm just going to do me and my boys. And I got to spend so much time with my dad and my stepmom and my family, like when we lived in Colleen. And I was sad, and I missed having someone beside me. Like, I missed having someone beside me in bed, but I learned to appreciate a king size bed all by myself too. Like, it's pretty great. And on top of that, you get to have like these 2 little boys snuggle with you. So it just made those moments so much more precious to me. But it also gave me a sense of like pride and accomplishment. And it was the self-esteem boost that I needed, because I knew I had it in me. I knew I had it in me. I didn't know, because for a lot of my life, my childhood, my teen years, like a lot of my 20s, I I would do things, like I would have accomplishments, but I still didn't believe in myself. Or I would feel ashamed that I was getting things done, and I would hear from my first husband a lot, like, you're leaving me behind. And so there was a sense of guilt that came with that. But as a single mom, I didn't have to like deal with any of that. I didn't have to like hear, you're leaving me behind. No, like, I have my boys, and I'm taking them with me. Like, we're going up, like, we're doing it. And I'm showing them that you can do anything that you put your mind to as long as you have the right people around you and you have the belief in yourself. If you sit in it and you're like, man, I am really doing this and I'm proud of myself. And it's such a great feeling to have. And that is the different material that I'm talking about whenever my heart actually healed from this, was just kind of like astonishing, like just kind of awestruck at, you know, what I was capable of doing. And I'm sure like my angels and my guides and my ancestors, like I'm sure that like my mom helped me from beyond, the way that she couldn't whenever she was here on earth. Um, I mean, I couldn't have done any of it like without my dad or my mom or my stepmom or just friends, like just amazing friends that I've had over the years that have just really like been my cheerleaders. And I don't think there's anything wrong with knowing that we deserve better things. And that was one thing that I felt shame over too, was if I had ever said, I deserve something good, well, you just sound selfish. And it's like, well, that's not fair. Like, I feel like everybody deserves good things, but I'm not supposed to deserve good things. And then when I had the good things without anybody's help, that's where it was like just beautiful. It was just amazing. And then the minute I wasn't looking for anybody, I met my husband now. And he's been like, we've been around each other all of our lives nearly, which is kind of crazy. But when you heal yourself and you tell yourself that you can move past something, you just need to feel it, and you heal, you get to this amazing space, this glorious, really space where you have worked on yourself and you're confident and you know that you don't need anybody. You want someone, but you're not chasing after anything. You're not trying to ruin someone else's life because you want them back or you think that they're living a better life than you. Like, you work on you and you focus on what's precious to you, whatever that looks like. And the right person and the right things will be like they'll be attracted to you. And I am telling you, I've been through a lot of pain in my past 2 marriages and my relationships. But man, this guy that I'm with right now, he's pretty amazing. And I say that with all sincerity. I finally, we've been together for nearly 5 years, and I finally like got to be with my person that is supportive, that loves me for me, that is able to do his own thing. I'm able to do my own thing. There's no thought that he's going to run off with someone else or not tell me where he's going to be. There is like full trust in my heart with this guy. He loves my boys. He is a great provider. He and I are on the same wavelength. And we might have a little heated discussion from time to time, but we both work on communication, and therapy, individual therapy has really helped. And we've done the work before we've even gotten together, which makes everything great too. Whenever we recognize that we need help and we're able to have that self-awareness of like, hey, I've really got to find someone professional to talk to. And then really implementing those things that we learn in therapy. I I couldn't ask for a better partner now in my 40s and my late 30s. So that's long, I'm sorry, but grief does get better. I'm not a believer that time heals all wounds, but this is where the self-reflection is really important when we lose our relationships or we lose ourselves in relationships or when there's grief to have to deal with when it comes to being away from someone or losing the life that we had or losing the dream that we thought we had at that time, how life looked. It's really better to look at that and be like, you know what? There are lessons that I needed to learn from that. And I'm going to let it go. I'm going to distance myself from that because that was who I was back then. I'm not that person anymore. I I am really becoming this phoenix of what my ashes were back then. And that's an awesome thing. But it's like, okay, accepting responsibility for the hurt that you've caused. I know that I caused some hurt, and I know that there's times where I don't handle myself nearly as well as I should. But I've had to take responsibility for the way that I've been in my past relationships to contribute to my own pain and my own grief. That is a really big part of welcoming another person that's going to love you better into your life when you're older. To me, I've found that relationships really never die. Like, love really never dies. It just takes on a different form. Love from love that I had from my past two marriages have taken on the purest form in my two boys. And that's what helps me. That's what helps me let go. That's what helped me let go and realize that I was my own sovereign person and I was capable of living up to my own expectations. And when I realized that like my own reality was mine and they had theirs and they were free to do their own thing and I was free to do mine, that is when the magic happened. um if anybody wants to talk about this with me, like if y'all are having a hard time, please reach out. Y'all can leave a comment below. I can reach out to you. You can reach out to me. Um, I just want you to know that there are people who know what you're going through when it comes to the loss of like relationships or divorce or splitting up or losing yourself to someone. And this also goes into the subject of narcissistic abuse, which I will speak out about another video because I really need to go to bed. But I hope that this helped, and I hope that y'all have a great night. Work on yourself, journal if you have to, cry if you need to, tear up some stuff if you need to, go run, do some movement. Any way that you can get that energy, the sad, gray energy out of you, it really, truly helps. Go talk to a friend that you trust. Anything. But just know that you're not alone in this. And like I said, if you're needing someone to reach out to, I'm here. So I hope y'all have a great night, and I will see y'all soon.